Hi, everyone. This is the quick overview for Chapter 11, Crime. Just kind of doing some real quick discussion to make sure that we're all on the same page. I know that most of you did take sociology, intro to sociology, so you are familiar with norms. But first off, I always like to start off the crime chapter by just reminding people that crime is just the deviance of the law, right? So the breaking of the social norm that is the law. So when the criminal justice system gets involved, this is when we talk about crime. Okay, there are lots of different types of norms, right? Norms are an aspect of culture. They are the expected behaviors that take place. They exist in the forms of folkways, mores, and laws. And laws are ultimately just those formally sanctioned aspects of norms, right? So when we talk about sanctions, those are the punishments or the rewards that reinforce our behavior. So it really is just a matter of kind of looking at this is the one form of deviance that society seems to care the most about. Okay, when we talk about crime, there are two key areas, two key perspectives that your book talks about. That's the normative perspective, normative consensus perspective, and the normative conflict perspective. So kind of when we first kind of touch on these things, it is like when we talk about a consensus perspective, consensus means that most of us agree. Okay. And when we're talking about the normative consensus perspective of crime, we're really kind of focusing on those types of crimes, perspectives of crime or deviance that most individuals believe or agree with that they should be illegal. Okay? So then the other perspective that your book talks about, the normative conflict perspective, it kind of focuses on the disagreement, right? The disagreement about what should or shouldn't be legal or illegal. And if we really kind of think about it in those big major perspectives at the larger scale of sociology, we can really kind of think about the functionalist perspective and the conflict perspective, and hopefully those can kind of help you kind of see consensus, the normative consensus, and the normative conflict. The normative consensus is really about the shared agreement, right? The continuous, the agreement, the belief, right? The lack of chaos, right? That when that consensus of belief that we share our culture, right? So it's that shared idea that we should all agree upon, right? But if we think about conflict perspective really does focus on how there is a constant disagreement in society based on an inequality. So when we talk about consensus crimes, and we talk about the consensus perspective, everybody kind of agrees that things should be against the law. And there's would be things such as like murder, rape. I haven't come across too many people that agree that those things are not, who feel like they don't agree that we should punish people for those type of acts. However, when we talk about the conflict perspective, it kind of brings us into these key ideas of perspectives that really kind of disagreement on what should or shouldn't be legal. These come into some of the things that we might also refer to as what a lot of people would call victimless crimes. These are crimes that not everybody agrees to be against the law. They are things such as drug use, possibly gambling, prostitution, things like that, that it really is a matter of someone in power has created those laws. So again, bringing us back to that conflict perspective, those in power create things, create these norms in society, these expectations in society, that then can oppress others. Okay? So just kind of bringing this back to that. Now your book then breaks it down even more by talking about melee prohibited crimes and consensus crimes. And melee and crimes. So when we really kind of think of melee prohibited crimes in many ways could relate very much to the conflict perspective, the normative conflict perspective, because these are things that not everybody agrees should be a crime. These are ones that are really technically only a crime because we created a law that makes it so. One that I kind of think about is jaywalking. When we really think about jaywalking, we've created a law that says this is where you can or cannot walk, right? But walking across the street, most of the time we would not even really think about it. If there wasn't a crosswalk, we wouldn't really think about that that's where we're supposed to walk, right? So when we talk about those type of crimes, the ones that somebody has created this law, and then because this law has been created, we follow it. It's a male prohibita. Crimes kind of fall into that when we really, think about that perspective. Now, male and se are ones that there is some sort of moral agreement that most of us would say these are something that kind of violates our moral conscience. Most members of society do agree. So again, when we talk about the male and se, I kind of then relate back to the consensus. Now, I do have a quick video clip. I actually just saw this movie just recently. It just kind of came on when I was on my way to visit my daughter. We turned on the TV in the hotel, and this movie was on. And it kind of, when I saw this, it made me really think about it. A lot of students get the male prohibita and the male and se confused. I want to share a clip from a movie that I'm sure many of you have probably seen that I think may be helpful. So I'm going to share an application screen. There we go. Give me just a second. I'm sharing the audio. And here we go.
Now let's commence with our usual torture. Ms. Woods.
I'm going to have to rewind because I didn't realize my sound was off. All right, here we go.
Now let's commence with our usual torture. Ms. Woods. Would you rather have a client who committed a crime malum in se or malum prohibitum?
Neither.
And why is that?
I would rather have a client who's innocent.
Dare to dream, Miss Woods. Ms. Kensington, which would you prefer?
Malum prohibitum. Because then the client would have committed a regulatory infraction as opposed to a dangerous crime.
Well done, Miss Kensington. You've obviously done your homework. Now, let us look at malum prohibitum a little more closely. It has been said. Yes, Ms. Woods.
I changed my mind. I'd pick the dangerous one because I'm not afraid of a challenge.
Okay, so that's something to kind of help you remember the two if it helps you to go back to Legally Blonde. Okay, so again, male and se is typically those violent type of acts that most all of us would agree should be against the law and that we should enforce. Okay, male prohibita are those minor infractions that, while we do want to kind of sanction them in some way, are they as detrimental when broken? Possibly not so much. Okay. So in this chapter, there are some other things that I tend to try to, with these videos, just give you the things that students tend to kind of get stuck on, right? So I open up, I wanted to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page of understanding that crime is just the breaking of a norm, right? No different than any other form of deviance. However, it is a sanctioned norm, right? When the governing system gets involved and creates a formal sanction, that's when we have a law, which then creates crime. Okay. Then we talk about the different types of crime. Your book is pretty clear about talking about the difference between property crime, violent crime. Important crime that you really need to pay attention to is organized and occupational type of crimes, white collar crimes, right? So please let me know if you have questions about white collar crimes. White collar crimes, from a sociological standpoint, are actually some of the most deadly and costly. We don't really talk about them very much. We don't really hear about them very much, mainly because they are typically done in the acts of official business. Also typically done by, or the ones that we wouldn't hear that much about, typically done by individuals who have some power or authority. Okay. Your book also talks about the macro level transnational crimes. Goes into talking about crime measurement, and some crime trends. In the videos that I'm sharing with you, I am sharing crash course videos. She does kind of touch on a lot of that in her video, so I'm going to kind of let those go as far as the crime measurements, and let you kind of watch what she's saying there. The criminal justice system, there it is broken into various stakeholders, the police and the court system. Important to kind of understand the court system and then corrections. When we talk about corrections, corrections come in different forms of punishment, right? So different levels and different types of punishment that your book talks about. All of these are forms of deterrence in order to keep people from committing crimes. Your book does talk about specific forms of punishment in the form of incapacitation, rehabilitation, and retribution. Okay, these are all kind of forms of punishment that would then hopefully help deter. Because when we talk about deterrence, deterrence is the purpose of a punishment is to try to keep people from committing crime. Right? So when we think about, like, speeding, probably everybody in here has broken the law, because realistically, I'll say this: I went to traffic court one day, and was sitting in the area watching the court, and there was actually a guy arguing, saying that he wasn't in a criminal court because he really honestly did not realize traffic court was a criminal court. When you speed and you get a ticket, you are getting the penalty for breaking the law. So you are technically a criminal. Now let's think about this. Those speeding tickets are deterrents, right? They're a form of a deterrence. We tend to try not to speed if we're afraid we're going to get a ticket, right? And we think about certain areas when there's a lot of construction, right? They're typically, they lower the speed and they up the fines, right? That is in hopes to deter you from speeding, right? In hopes to keep the workers safe, right? We have to kind of really think about how all of this together. There are lots of theories in this chapter. Key theories, functionalism is then broken down into a few other theories in that basic paradigm. Social control theory, opportunity theory, anomie, strain. Strain is one of the most utilized theories in psychology. So it is a it's a mid-range theory actually, but it really does talk about the means and the goals, and it is a functionalist perspective. However, a lot of students kind of get that confused with the conflict perspective. Please make sure that you understand that theory. Conflict theory, in your book, it talks about the bourgeoisie legality and Marxist theory, and then also talks about feminist criminology. That's all under that paradigm. Make sure that you understand that. When we talk about the symbolic interactionist perspective, these are juvenile delinquency theories, labeling theory. I believe your book also calls it social reaction theory. I think it's what they use, but it's technically labeling theory. They also talk about differential association theory. Any of you who have taken intro to sociology, which is, again, most of you, you're probably already familiar with these theories, okay? So just kind of read through them, the symbolic ones, right? And you should be familiar with strain. You should be familiar with anomie, okay? And of course, conflict theory as a whole, maybe not so much bourgeoisie legality and Marxist criminology, but understanding conflict perspective will kind of give you already a base to understand those theories. There's a few specialized theories in this chapter. Rational choice theory. This is really cost versus benefits, okay? We weigh our costs versus our benefits, and this theory basically says that human reasoning, we act as human, we use our actions are based on what's going to benefit us the most. So we are using our rationality, right? Now, but we need to step back and understand what's rational for you or for me may not be rational to somebody else, right? Because we're weighing on our own basis of what we feel is beneficial or not beneficial. Okay? Some of us will look for short term, some of us will look for long term, some of us will look for immediate, right? That immediate satisfaction where others don't care, right? About the immediate satisfaction. They're looking at the big picture. It also comes down to the potential cost, right? And the potential benefit. So some of us will look straight up at the cost, and some of us will look at the potential for, well, if I'm not caught, right? When we really are talking about deviance, that cost versus benefit analysis that takes place. Your book specifically breaks down into bounded rationality, which when we talk about crime, bounded rationality is the idea that our individual thought process may be constrained. Your book specifically talks about low intelligence, chemical dependency, or mental illness can impact our bounded rationality. It can be part of that bounded rationality. We have to really kind of step back and think this is why a choice I might make might not be the same as a choice that you might make based on our own personal circumstances. The last two that your book specifically talks about that I want to mention is routine activities theory and broken windows theories. Both of those theories are pretty straightforward in understanding. Routine activities basically says if I'm given the opportunity in my routine daily things to be able to commit crime, I might be likely to do it if I don't fear getting caught. Okay. So just kind of really thinking about that. And broken windows theory is something that you've probably heard about before. Broken windows theory really talks about when we maintain our environment, there'll be less crime, right? Because when a community is lacking resources and then it is obvious that they're lacking a concern for their community, right? If it looks bad, it likely is bad, right? That's what broken windows theory is talking about. So it really deeply relates to a theory I like to talk about is community capacity, which your book doesn't discuss, but when the community pulls itself together and kind of can build ownership, there won't be the community won't look as bad. And then when people start to care about the community, they're less likely to commit crime in that community, okay? So this week, same kind of thing as each week. Make sure that you read, make sure that you watch the videos that I've given you. I've given you a few this week, not a whole lot. If I start to see questions about certain theories, I might put some more videos out there. I have given you the resources from the textbook, but I also had created a PowerPoint that I used when we went online in the spring for my social problems class. So there is a PowerPoint that I myself have made that I've shared in this folder as well. And take your quiz, do your issues and controversies. This week should be interesting. I hope that you'll appreciate it. It is about policing in the U.S. And those discussion board posts out early so that we have time to discuss them. Take your quiz and have a great day.